Hey everybody, it's Christian Buckley doing another MVP Buzz Chat, and I'm talking today with Jemima. Hello.
Hello.
And for folks that don't know you, who are you, where are you, and what do you do?
So my name is Jemima Abu. I am a front-end developer and I'm currently based in London and I'm a front-end developer, so I build websites basically using a variety of JavaScript frameworks.
And you are a brand new MVP as
Yeah.
well. So how long now? How long have you been seasoned in the MVP community?
Fairly recent, I think 2 months. So in September, I got the email 1st of September and here I am now.
I always like to ask too, like, did you know a lot of MVPs? Were you aware of the program? How did you find your way into the program?
I actually just knew one MVP, but I went to a lot of the same conferences with that one MVP, and then eventually he was like, "Oh, you should try out for the MVP program." And I think he said that like last year or the year before. And then this year I was like, "Oh, right, the MVP program, right?" I said I was going to do that. So I messaged him and asked for like the requirements, the procedure, and I got the recommendation and I applied. It was great.
Did you have to change anything that you did? Because that's it's an adjustment for some people that are thinking about the program of like keeping track of capturing, recording, kind of all of the contributions and things you're doing in the community. Did you have to change anything that you were doing to
No, actually, because my thing is I always record what I do because I mostly do conference talks or I write articles. And then on my website, I always list out all my talks because it's very therapeutic for me. I love like maintaining the tables and seeing the numbers increase and arranging everything. So I've been monitoring my conference talks for like 5 years now. So it was very easy, like getting all the like contributions I made with all my articles. They're also on one blog. So very easy copying that over as well. So honestly, it was a very natural moving over, copying and pasting process.
I have to say, as somebody who, again, I speak at conferences, I write a ton. I'm creating more and more video content, but writing is like my
Mhm.
primary activity. As I've interviewed the last, I would say, a couple dozen MVPs as part of this series, more and more they're not. I mean, speaking regularly, that's a fairly common thing, but I've run into some that have never presented or rarely present and don't really write. And so a lot of what they do is um, I've been running into a lot of people that have been out in forums answering questions or creating scripts and code bits out for GitHub and sharing with the community that way. But it's
Mm.
good to talk to somebody who does normal things.
Yeah, I wouldn't say it's. I think for some people, contributing to forums is a bit more normal than conference speaking, especially for
It is.
developers, I think, because in general, we just work on our laptops all day. So going out and being in the public eye and in the public space, I would say is more out of the norm, at least for developers that I know.
I'd be interested though so if you have a topic, maybe I'll ask the question first. I'm going to
Yeah.
follow up with like what you do with your content afterwards. But
Mm.
like, what are the hot topics right now? Like, what are you writing about, talking about?
Well, my most hot topic right now, I would say, is accessibility and also modern web APIs that
Mm.
are less JavaScript based. So with accessibility, there is I'm basically doing a talk explaining like the importance of accessibility and then relating it to the European Accessibility Act that will be coming into law next year in June, so like June 2025. So that's a very like a lot of my conferences from now till June 2025 are going to be talking about that because it's just kind of like to prepare people for what's coming. And
Yeah.
then for modern web APIs, that's something that I got into recently because with a lot of my builds recently, I've been moving away from JavaScript and looking for like native HTML and CSS alternatives. And I was like, this is actually really fun. I want to give a talk on that. So I have a couple of conferences lined up to just go more into using just CSS and HTML and like avoiding JavaScript when it's not necessary. So
I
that's
have
it.
to say that. So being in the tech community and watching, there's a lot of watching a lot of the commentary out there as a non-developer. But I most of the time when I see people talking about JavaScript, it's not a positive response. They're complaining about something with JavaScript. But I mean,
Yeah.
there's a long history with that. And it's, I know Microsoft years ago when they made a shift more towards open source. And I think the idea of, um, meeting people where they are, being more
Mhm.
supportive of the broader developer community and not so restrictive, that
Mhm.
really kind of changed people's thinking around it. I know coming from the SharePoint side, I mean, a
Mm.
lot of what people were trying to do in the early days of SharePoint when it was so ugly, it's a very beautiful product now. And the latest announcements from Ignite means so much cool stuff coming out of the SharePoint side of things. It
Mhm.
is very exciting. If you're not already paying attention to that stuff, go
Mhm.
take a look at the design aspects of what's happening with SharePoint. But
Okay.
JavaScript was important to be able to manipulate and do things on the front end to make it more presentable.
Yeah.
So it's understandable.
Yeah, I think it's because I my thing with JavaScript is I feel like there are just times where it's not needed. So it's great for dynamic and like interactivity, but you don't need JavaScript for toggling content. I don't think you can use the details elements. You don't need it for frankly, I don't think you need it for carousels. That's just my personal opinion. I like a simple carousel. I like a swipeable scroll through carousel. You can implement a button if you need to, but yeah. So
Well,
yeah, it's just like
that's always the battle, though. Is like use what's depending on the platform as out of the box as possible,
yeah.
and then add in when you need to extend it
Yeah,
beyond.
exactly.
But that's the ongoing battle. That's the battle between the marketing side and the development side of that battle. Well, we could do it this way. Why? It was like, well, we know how to do it that way. It's like no, but
Yeah.
yeah. Well, so I was going to ask. So about so you've identified like the topics. So what do you do with that content? How do you extend the life of like so if you're going to go and present on that topic
Mhm.
uh, at a conference? What else do you do with that content?
So a lot of times, if I'm presenting a topic at a conference, it's something I've probably already used at work. So the content itself was created from the experience of it, or other times I would. So my content is kind of interlayered in things that I use in my daily job, articles that I write, and then conferences that I speak at. So if I have an idea for a talk, or I've presented a talk before, and I think, oh, this thing would be good in an article format, then I'll just write an article for that. If I've worked on something at work and I think, oh, this is something that would be cool to present, then I would do a conference talk on that. So it's like the three of them are kind of layered. Sometimes I go to conferences and I learn new things, and then it applies to my work life as well. So it's just like a useful circle on keeping the content flowing.
How much do you get from like feedback from your audiences that then change what you present on or even what you are doing with that
Yeah, so a
more
lot of
content?
times the thing with the conference is that because like I speak at different conferences at different places at different like sometimes it's not even like web conferences. Like I think last time I spoke at .NET and that had nothing to do with web.
Yeah.
So or at least had nothing to do with JavaScript. So it's like a lot of the conferences I speak at are not so interlayered that the content so people perceive it differently. Like if I'm giving an accessibility talk at a web conference, it's different from an accessibility talk at a UX conference. So if there's common feedback, like what I like to do is I like to save questions. So if I get a question that's really useful and I go to another conference and I'm like, does anyone have any questions?
Yeah.
If no one says yes, I'll be like, okay, I have a question from last time I gave this talk, and then I will say the question that the person asked, and then I'll give the answer. So it's like in terms of feedback, sometimes it might be things like, oh, I found the talk too simple or too basic. Because the fact is a lot of times I do conferences from a base level because I feel like I am explaining the concept, not necessarily giving you the advanced details. Because I want people that have never heard of this concept before to be able to enjoy the talk. So it's if it's conferences like that, I might adapt it better to the audience. Like if I'm speaking at React Advanced, it won't be the same thing as if I'm speaking at like not an advanced conference. So
Yeah.
yeah, it's mostly just like adapting it to the audience, saving their questions and using it later. Sometimes I have like really fun conversations with people after that they're like, oh, we do use this thing at work and these are the issues we ran into with, and then I include that
It,
in the conference too.
it's funny. I just did a session at a conference a week ago, and next week I will be doing the same topic. I've already made changes to it based off of some of the discussion. But to your point too, is like I always have a lot more content that I'll be able to get through,
Mm,
and whether I crank it up to a different level, get more technical, more in depth on that, really depends on the audience response and questions.
Yeah.
And so I always encourage, like, even going to an introductory session on a new topic for me,
Mhm.
to ask questions that could take it a different direction. Because I do the exact same thing. In fact, that my whole session on building feedback loops, this
Mhm.
is the one that I'm doing, which is about surveys and polling. And I come from a mostly product development background,
Mhm.
and constantly incorporating, like, what's our support data telling us, what are the feature requests telling us of direction, what are the competitive space telling us that we should go and do, and
Mhm.
incorporating all of that in. It's the same thing, keeping track of what have people been asking for. Well, if we keep hearing that request again and again, that might be something we want to go and fix or focus on.
Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, no, I love that aspect about the live interactions.
Yeah.
Well, very
Yeah. I
cool.
think
So you talked about, so you primarily, so I think we have in your profile, you've got all your social links out on the Microsoft MVP site. I
yeah.
don't point people enough to that. If you're ever wondering where MVPs are, you go to mvp.microsoft.com, and then you can search and find myself, Jemima. We're on there with profiles with all the different links. But so I will include a blog post that has all of your social links and things around you and a little bit of bio information.
Sounds
But
good.
what else should people know about you, or potentially if they want to reach out and talk to you, like around what topics? What are you most interested in talking to people about?
Well, yeah, like I said, I'm very big on accessibility because I think the thing I find interesting about accessibility is that, to me at this point, because I've spoken about it so much and learned about it so much, every time I'm about to give the talk, I'm like, surely people know this already. Surely
Mm.
I wouldn't be telling anyone anything new. But every single time I give the talk, people are like, oh, I didn't know that, or I didn't know that you shouldn't do that. And I'm like, well, I guess I have to keep giving this talk then. So yeah, I love talking about accessibility. If you are like using any new accessibility tools or you just have any questions about accessibility in general, big fan of talking about those. Also really I'm getting into like the open source space. So would not mind discussing more about open source as well. JavaScript, I'm always down for JavaScript because I love it and I hate it. So if you wanna bash JavaScript or you want to exalt it, I'm good either way. So yeah.
Could I say that isn't it kind of ironic that you're passionate about accessibility, but you live in one of the least accessible as far as visiting countries? If for folks that don't know, too, like visiting London. So I have my son-in-law is permanently in a wheelchair, and
Mm.
so I think about that wherever I go. Like um, in England, like you're always having to step up over a threshold. There's no, like, there's an elevator, yes, but then there's 3 steps down in a hallway to get place. It is just one of
Yeah.
the in the US. I mean, it's just part of all the customs. When you build, it has to be so wide, doors so wide, accessible
Mhm.
facilities, all those kinds of things for all that. And I know that's just one aspect of accessibility.
Yeah,
Um,
London is very interesting because it'll be like, oh, there's no step-free access at this station, so go to the station the 2 stops away, and then do what?
right,
Take a bus? What's the point? If
right.
yeah,
Exactly. No, it is what's cool about over the last couple of years, I've just become more aware of and Microsoft has put more emphasis around some of the accessibility features and capabilities within the products.
Hmm.
And having to now use reading glasses, I've become more sensitive to large, having those accessibility features and different capabilities. But again, my son-in-law, who was right-handed and basically is paralyzed on his right side, and
Hmm.
so had to relearn to write and do everything with the single hand and his left hand.
Hmm.
I think about a lot of those features now, like how would my son-in-law use this capability and
Yeah.
and do more.
Yeah, exactly. I
Um,
think a lot of it is just like it's the developer bias thing, like if it works for you, you don't really think that it wouldn't work for someone else. But the fact is like people use things differently. And that is the thing that is most interesting about accessibility is that eventually everyone will have some form of disability or the other. Because even as you grow old, like your eyesight can worsen, your mobility can worsen, like your mental health can depreciate. So it's just there's a lot of things that they will eventually affect you, but a lot of times people won't think about it until it starts affecting them, which I guess is why the talks are still useful because it's just a helpful way of presenting that there are other ways to think about this thing, than how you're currently doing it.
Well, that isn't that just humanity? Like so I'm a governance guy, and companies don't think about governance. They don't think about security until there's a breach, until there's a mishandling of sensitive information. There's, that's it. You can, we're not good at preventative anything.
No.
Preventative health, preventative on IT security. But yeah, that's the truth. But making this kind of content, the accessibility stuff, more visible, so that I use the example of like for a year I commuted to work on a motorcycle. Well, after that 1 year, and the motorcycle, while I was not on it, by the way, got hit by a car while it was parked. Somebody in a crowded parking lot, and they rammed my bike and destroyed it. I
think that's one of the lesser motorcycle-related accidents. Because at least you weren't actively driving.
Right. I say that my wife was very thankful. She was nervous every day that I commuted on that. But that 1 year of riding a motorcycle for a lifetime now has made me more aware of motorcycles on the road. So if you go and you learn more about the accessibility, you then become more thoughtful and aware of like your design of presentations, of how of different topics, features that need to be highlighted when you're presenting on a technical topic, for example.
Yep, exactly.
So love that. Well, excellent. Well, thank you for joining us. It's nice to meet you, of course, and hopefully you're coming out to the MVP Summit in March.
Hopefully.
Yeah. So if not, please prioritize it. I always say this for every new MVP. It is the best benefit, the perk of being in the program is the ability to network with Microsoft people and your peers in the MVP community. It's awesome. And that's for people watching that are interested in becoming MVP. I mean, it's a huge perk. So there's a lot of other cool stuff, but that's number one.
Personally, I like the GitHub Copilot perk, but I think the networking will be pretty useful too.
There's some great stuff that's in there. Well, thanks. So Jemima, where are you most active in social? If people want to reach out and connect with you, where can people find you most easily?
I guess LinkedIn currently is what I'm most active on. Yeah.
Okay. Well, we'll have that, of course. Do you have a contact form on your blog, on your site?
I have my contact form leads to my LinkedIn. So
there you go. Hey, that's a great way to solve it too.
Yeah.
I do about the same thing as well. So there might be a contact form on there that I never use, but LinkedIn is pretty busy. So
LinkedIn it has a chat feature. That's all we need anyway. So
exactly.
Go right there.
Sometimes it's a hardship. There's a lot of junk that comes through that, but we deal with the junk because of all the good things that come through.
Yeah.
Well, thanks so much for your time.
No worries. Thanks for having me. All right. Bye.